Protecting the enemy's daughter made the human a hero. The mother remained grateful forever the wind howled through the borderlands where the human lands met the dark forest. Trees with twisted branches scratched the sky like skeletal fingers, and mist curled around the roots as if hiding secrets no one dared to uncover. Kale crouched behind a rocky outcrop, his eyes scanning the horizon. The war had grown tired, like an old wound that never healed. Every village he passed had stories of burned homes, stolen lives, and empty fields. Yet, despite everything, Kale moved forward not as a hero, but because survival demanded it. He adjusted the strap of his leather satchel and gripped the hilt of his sword. His heart beat with a mixture of exhaustion and caution. The humans had sent him here, not to attack the Vale directly, but to watch the borderlands. Rumors whispered that strange creatures roamed the dark forest, and occasionally a human or Vale would vanish without a trace. Kale had always believed in the stories, even if he had never seen the truth. Tonight, however, the forest itself seemed alive. The shadows moved differently as if they were watching him, and then he saw her. Lyra emerged from the fog, her figure small but radiant. Even in the dim light, her pale hair shimmered and her eyes glimmered like moonlight on water. She moved carefully, each step measured and deliberate. Kale's first instinct was to turn and hide, but something in her movements made him pause. She did not carry the confidence of a soldier or the malice of an enemy. She moved with fear and determination, and in that moment Kale understood. She was alone, and she needed help. He stepped forward cautiously, making a sound that might have been a twig snapping underfoot. Lyra froze, her wide eyes locking onto his. For a moment, neither spoke. Kale could see the tension in her hands as she clutched a small satchel close to her chest. Her breath came in sharp, frightened gasps. "I am not your enemy," Kale said, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. Her voice was soft but firm. "A human, why are you here?" "I could ask the same," Kale replied. "But it seems neither of us belong here entirely. Who are you and why are you in the forest alone?" Lyra's eyes darted to the trees around them as if expecting some unseen predator to appear. I am Lyra," she said finally. "I ran away. They wanted me to do things I could not. I had no choice." Kale studied her. Her words were vague, but the fear in her voice was clear. "Who wanted you? The Vale?" Lyra nodded, her lips trembling. "My mother, Queen Maleth, she is powerful, and she is angry when I do not obey." Kale felt a chill run down his spine. The Vale were already terrifying enough in tales. A vengeful queen was something far worse. "Then you have nowhere to go," he said quietly. "The forest is dangerous at night. Wolves, spirits, things even I cannot always fight." Lyra's gaze softened just slightly as if she recognized the truth in his words. "Then, will you help me?" Kale hesitated. Every instinct in his body told him to stay away from Vale matters. Helping a Vale princess could bring him death even if he survived the forest itself. But when he looked at her, small, frightened, yet brave in a way he had never seen before, he felt something stir in him. Perhaps it was pity. Perhaps it was something else, something older, something that made him remember why he had once believed in honor. "I will help you," he said finally. Relief washed over Lyra's face, but it was brief. The shadows seemed to grow thicker and Kale sensed movement around them. "We must move quickly," he warned. "There may be others tracking you." Lyra nodded, and together they slipped into the forest. The trees closed over them like a cathedral, blocking the moonlight. Strange sounds echoed, whispers, the cracking of branches, and the occasional distant howl. Kale kept his hand on the hilt of his sword, ready for anything. "Why are you helping me?" Lyra asked quietly as they walked. Kale shrugged, though he knew the answer was more complicated than a simple gesture. "I don't like cruelty," he admitted, "and I think everyone deserves a chance to survive no matter who they are." Lyra glanced at him, surprised. "Even a human, even though we are enemies." Kale's lips curved into a faint, wry smile. "Enemies are just people who haven't met the right reason to trust each other." For a moment, Lyra did not respond, but the tension between them shifted slightly. Trust, fragile and new, began to grow. They moved deeper into the forest, avoiding the beaten paths and listening for signs of danger. The further they went, the more Lyra began to speak, cautiously at first, then more openly. She told him of the Vale Citadel, of her mother's strict rule, of the cruel expectations placed upon her shoulders. Kale listened, offering comfort where he could, but never pretending to understand fully the life she had lived. Hours passed. The night grew colder and the mist thickened. Kale knew they could not rest yet, The forest was not forgiving, and any lapse in attention could be fatal. At one point, Lyra stumbled on a root and Kale caught her, holding her steady. "You are stronger than you look," he said, carefully letting go of her arm. Lyra looked down, embarrassed. "I have to be. If I am not strong, I won't survive." Kale's gaze softened. He could see the weight she carried, the fear that she could not speak of aloud. Protecting her felt like more than just a choice now. It felt like a responsibility that he could not abandon, no matter the danger. Suddenly, the forest fell silent. The usual whispers of the wind and distant cries of animals disappeared. Kale's senses sharpened immediately. Something was coming. "They are here," Lyra whispered, fear overtaking her calm. Kale's hand went to his sword. "Stay behind me," he commanded. "Do not make a sound." From the shadows emerged figures, humans, soldiers by the look of their armor. Kale recognized the insignia immediately, scouts from his own army. But their eyes were not friendly. They scanned the forest, looking for someone to capture. Kale's stomach twisted. These were not ordinary soldiers. They had orders, and their orders did not include mercy. Lyra trembled beside him. They want me?" Kale nodded grimly. "It seems so. We have to move now." He guided her through hidden paths, ducking behind fallen logs and rocks until they reached a small clearing. Moonlight spilled over a frozen stream, and Kale paused. "We can't keep running forever," he said. "But for tonight, we survive." Lyra looked at him, fear and gratitude mixed in her eyes. Why are you risking yourself for me?" Kale met her gaze steadily. "Because no one deserves to be hunted like prey, and because you are not just a daughter of the Vale, you are someone who deserves to live." The words lingered between them, heavy with meaning. For the first time since he had met her, Lyra allowed herself a small, genuine smile. But their brief peace shattered when a distant shout echoed through the forest. The human soldiers had realized their quarry had escaped. Kale drew his sword, his eyes scanning the trees. "Move!" he urged, pulling Lyra into the deeper shadows. Branches scraped their faces, roots tried to trip them, but they ran, guided by instinct and the fragile bond forming between them. Kale could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, heavier than any armor or sword. Protecting Lyra was not just a choice now, it was a promise, and he could not fail. As they ran, Lyra stumbled again, and Kale caught her before she fell. She gasped, and he looked into her eyes. "You must trust me," he said firmly. "I will not let them take you." Lyra nodded, swallowing her fear. She did not fully understand why this human, someone who should be her enemy, cared so much for her survival. But in that moment she felt a spark of hope she had not known in years. The forest seemed endless, yet Kale guided her with unwavering determination. Somewhere ahead, the path would open to safety, or at least a temporary refuge. But danger was not far behind, and the night held more secrets than either of them could imagine. Kale's heart beat fast, not just from the run, but from the realization that this night would change everything. He had crossed a line he could not return from. By protecting Lyra, he had placed himself against both the humans and the Vale. And yet, as he glanced at her, he knew he could not abandon her, not now, not ever. Above them, the moon broke through the clouds, casting silver light on the forest floor. It illuminated Lyra's face, pale and delicate, yet resolute. Kale felt an unexpected warmth in his chest. In the darkness, among the shadows and whispers of the forest, a strange kind of hope was born, one that neither war nor vengeance could extinguish. And somewhere in the distance, the faint echo of a queen's fury began to stir. The forest stretched endlessly, its trees towering like silent sentinels. Mist clung to the ground, wrapping roots and stones in a pale, ghostly blanket. Kale and Lyra moved cautiously, their footsteps soft against the damp earth. The distant shouts of the human soldiers had faded, but Kale knew they were not safe. Danger always lingered in these woods, hidden behind every shadow, waiting for the careless or the weak. Lyra kept close to him, her small hand occasionally brushing his arm for balance as they navigated the twisted path. Despite the fear still lingering in her eyes, there was a determination there, too. She would not allow herself to be caught again. Kale noticed it, the same fire he had once seen in soldiers facing impossible odds. But Lyra was no trained fighter. Her strength came from something else, the refusal to be broken. They found a narrow hollow by a stream, partially hidden by overhanging branches where they could rest for a while. Kale knelt, letting the water run over his hands as he assessed their situation. "We cannot stop for long," he said softly. "They will be searching for you. And if they find us," He did not finish the sentence, but Lyra understood. She dipped her hands into the cold stream, letting the water soothe her nerves. "I never knew humans could be kind," she said quietly, watching the ripples. "I thought everyone only cared about power, about winning." Kale looked at her, noting the weariness in her voice. "Some humans are like that," he admitted, "but some fight for what is right, even when the world tells them not to." Lyra turned to face him, her pale eyes shining in the dim moonlight. "And you are one of those humans." Kale smiled faintly, shaking his head. "I don't know yet, maybe I am, or maybe I'm just a man who refuses to leave someone behind." Lyra studied him silently, as if weighing his words. Then, without warning, she shivered and looked around nervously. "Kale, do you feel it? The air something is watching us." Kale tensed. He had felt it too. The forest seemed heavier, darker, as if the trees themselves held their breath. He drew his sword, the blade glinting faintly in the moonlight. "Stay close," he whispered, "and do not make a sound." From the shadows, figures began to emerge, creatures of the forest, neither human nor fully beast. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their movements were swift and silent. Kale recognized them from stories he had heard as a boy. Forest spirits, guardians of the old magic, known to test travelers with riddles and traps. One stepped forward, a tall figure with a cloak of leaves and eyes like polished amber. "Why do you enter the forest, child of two worlds?" it asked, its voice like wind through dry leaves. Lyra swallowed hard. I am running," she admitted. "I need to survive." The spirit's gaze shifted to Kale. "And you, human, why do you protect her?" Kale met its eyes steadily. "Because she is innocent, because she did not choose this life and she deserves a chance to live." The spirit studied them for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then you may pass for now, but the forest remembers. It will test your hearts before dawn, if not before nightfall." Kale exhaled, relieved, but Lyra remained tense. "What does it mean?" she asked. "It means," Kale said, keeping his tone calm, "that the forest and the world will not let us go easily, but we can face it together." For the next few hours, they walked in silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or distant call of a night bird. Kale noticed how Lyra's trust in him seemed to grow, fragile but real. She walked a little closer, matching his pace, and he felt a protective instinct he could not ignore. Finally, they reached an abandoned cabin, hidden beneath a canopy of thick branches. It had once been a hunter's shelter, now worn and empty, but it would provide temporary refuge. Kale lit a small fire, careful to keep it low, and Lyra watched him quietly. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "For saving me." Kale shook his head. "I haven't saved you yet, not completely, but we have tonight. And tonight you survive, that is all that matters." They ate in silence, sharing a small ration of bread and dried fruit Kale had carried. Lyra spoke little, but her eyes lingered on him, curious and cautious. Finally, she asked, "Kale, why do you care about me so much? You don't even know me." Kale looked into the fire, thinking carefully before he spoke. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "you see someone in danger and it doesn't matter who they are. You just know that leaving them to face it alone is wrong. I see you, Lyra. I see that you are not what they say you are, and I cannot leave you." Lyra's lips trembled and she looked away. "I never had anyone see me like that before." Kale's gaze softened. He wanted to tell her that she did not have to face the world alone, that he would always be there. But the forest had taught him caution. Words could be dangerous, so he simply nodded. As night deepened, they settled on the cabin floor, the fire crackling softly. Lyra curled up near the wall while Kale kept watch by the window. The shadows outside seemed to move, but he was ready for anything. Hours passed. The forest was alive with whispers and distant sounds. Kale could feel a presence, a dark energy that pressed against the edges of reality. He had heard of the Vale's magic, of the curses they could cast, and he knew that protecting Lyra meant more than fighting humans. There were forces far older and more dangerous than any soldier. He heard Lyra stir beside him. "Kale," she whispered. "I'm here," he replied immediately. "I feel strange," she admitted, "as if something is watching me, touching me, even though it is not near." Kale frowned. "The forest spirits warned us. There is old magic here. Powerful magic. It will test us, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, but whatever happens, we face it together." Lyra nodded, resting her head on her knees. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," she said quietly. "I just want to survive and maybe trust someone." Kale's heart ached at her words. She had lived her life in fear, trapped by expectations and threats she did not deserve. Now here she was, placing her trust in him, a human, a stranger, a protector she could not know fully. "Trust is a start," Kale said softly. "And survival is a fight we can win, together." The night stretched on, the cabin filled with the low sound of the fire and the distant rustling of the forest. Kale stayed awake, listening for any sign of danger. Every shadow, every whisper made his muscles tense, but he remained calm. For Lyra, he would be calm, strong, and ready. When dawn began to break, pale light filtering through the trees, Lyra stirred. She looked at Kale with gratitude and fear mixed in her eyes. "What now?" she asked. Kale stood and stretched. "Now we move," he said. "We need to reach the safe path that leads to the ruins. There we can rest more securely and plan our next step. But we must hurry. If the soldiers are still searching, they will not give up." Lyra nodded, gathering her few belongings. As they stepped outside, the morning mist hung low, and the forest seemed quieter, almost watchful. Kale led her along hidden paths, avoiding the open tracks and using his knowledge of the woods to stay undetected. Hours passed in tense silence. Lyra began to speak more freely, asking questions about the humans, about the borderlands, about Kale himself. He answered carefully, revealing only enough to build trust, never too much to put them at risk. At one point, they came upon a stream, wider and faster than the previous one. Kale helped Lyra across, steadying her hand in his. Their fingers brushed, and a spark of warmth passed between them. Neither spoke of it, but the connection was undeniable, a bond forming not only of survival, but of mutual reliance and understanding. As they moved further, Kale noticed something strange. The forest seemed to shift. The trees were closer together, their branches forming shapes that almost resembled faces. Shadows stretched unnaturally, and the air grew colder. He knew then that the forest was testing them just as the spirits had warned. Lyra shivered. "Kale, what is this place?" He kept his voice calm. "It's part of the forest. It will try to scare us, confuse us, but we must focus, step by step, one at a time." The path narrowed until they reached a small clearing with ancient ruins, overgrown and moss-covered. Here the forest seemed to retreat slightly, giving them a moment of peace. Lyra sank to the ground, exhausted, and Kale kept watch at the edge of the clearing. "This will be our temporary shelter," Kale explained. "The ruins are old. No one will look here, and the walls will give us some protection." Lyra nodded, relief washing over her face. "I thank you," she said, "for everything, for saving me, for staying with me." Kale looked at her, his chest tightening. "I promised I wouldn't leave you," he said simply, "and I never will." As night began to fall again, a cold wind swept through the ruins. Kale felt it on his skin, sharp and unnatural. The forest was restless, and the danger was far from over. But for now, they had a moment of respite, a fragile bond forged in fear, trust, and shared struggle. Lyra leaned against the crumbling stone wall, and Kale stood nearby, his eyes scanning the shadows. Somewhere in the distance, he could sense a presence, not human, not spirit, but something older. He did not know if it was friend or foe, only that it would come, and they would face it together. In that moment, Kale understood the truth of their situation. Protecting Lyra was not just about surviving the forest or evading soldiers. It was about building trust, facing fears, and preparing for a journey that would challenge everything they knew about themselves and the world. And as the stars began to peek through the night sky, Lyra closed her eyes, trusting for the first time in her life that someone truly cared for her. But far away, hidden in the shadows, eyes watched them both. Queen Malith's spies had tracked Lyra's escape. The mother's wrath was awakening, and the path they had chosen was only the beginning of the trials to come. The ruins they had rested in now lay behind them, swallowed by the morning mist. Kale led Lyra along hidden paths that twisted deeper into the forest. The trees became taller, their branches thicker, and the sunlight struggled to reach the ground. Every step felt heavier, as if the forest itself tried to slow their progress. Lyra walked silently beside him, her thoughts tangled with fear and wonder. The forest had tested them, yet Kale had remained steadfast. She could not deny the strange comfort she felt in his presence, even amidst the dangers that surrounded them. "Kale," she asked softly, breaking the silence, "why are we heading deeper into the forest?" "Wouldn't it be safer to stay hidden?" Kale glanced at her, his expression serious. "Hiding only delays the danger. We must move forward. There is a place where we can rest safely, a place where you might find answers, or at least protection." Lyra nodded, trusting him despite the uncertainty gnawing at her. She had never trusted anyone outside the walls of her mother's palace. The thought of letting a human guide her into unknown lands was terrifying. Yet with Kale, fear seemed tempered by hope. As they continued, the forest seemed to shift again. Shadows moved unnaturally, and whispers filled the air, though there was no one to speak them. Kale's hand never left the hilt of his sword, ready for anything. Hours later, they arrived at a narrow valley, where the forest opened to reveal an ancient path leading to the Vale Citadel. The towers rose high into the clouds, their dark stones shimmering with an unnatural light. Magic pulsed around the walls, strong and oppressive, yet strangely beautiful. Lyra gasped. "I have never seen it from this side," she whispered. "It's magnificent and terrifying," Kale nodded. "It is both," he said. "We must be careful. The Citadel is filled with people loyal to your mother. Some may help you, but most will see me as an intruder." Lyra hesitated. "Do you think anyone there will understand why you're helping me?" Kale shook his head. "I don't know, but we cannot wait for understanding. We must act." They moved carefully, avoiding the main gates, following a narrow service path hidden by enchanted trees. Kale had learned to trust the forest's guidance, and it led them safely to a smaller side entrance. Here, the walls were cracked with age, and the magic was weaker, allowing them to slip inside unnoticed. Inside, the citadel was a labyrinth of dark corridors and towering halls. Shadows stretched along the walls, and the air smelled of stone and old incense. Lyra clutched her satchel tightly, her heart racing. "I've never been here without my mother," she admitted. "Everything feels different when she's not in control." Kale placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You are not alone, remember that." We moved carefully, step by step. They navigated the corridors, moving closer to the heart of the citadel. Kale had never seen the Vale up close, and he was struck by their elegance and power. The servants and guards all carried themselves with an air of authority, their movements precise, almost unnatural. Yet he also noticed something subtle, fear beneath the surface. Even the Vale were wary of Queen Malith's wrath. Finally, they reached a chamber that seemed abandoned, its walls lined with ancient tapestries and faded symbols of magic. Kale gestured for Lyra to stay close. "This will be our temporary safe place," he whispered. "We can rest and plan our next move." Lyra sank to the floor, her body trembling with exhaustion. "I don't know how I survived until now," she admitted. "Everything has been so dark, so lonely." Kale knelt beside her. "You are stronger than you know," he said quietly, "and you are not alone anymore." For a moment, Lyra's eyes met his, and the distance between them seemed to vanish. But before she could speak further, a sudden sound echoed through the hall, a soft, deliberate clap. Both of them froze. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, regal, and unmistakably powerful. Queen Malith herself stepped forward, her dark eyes piercing. "So," she said, her voice smooth yet commanding, "the human has found my daughter. How interesting." Kale stood protectively in front of Lyra, his sword ready but lowered. "We mean no disrespect," he said firmly. "I only wish to protect her." Malith studied him, her expression unreadable. "Protect her? From whom? From me? From the world she was born into?" She circled them slowly, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Tell me, human, what makes you think you can protect a Vale princess?" Kale met her gaze steadily. "Because she is innocent, because she did not choose this life, because no one deserves to be hunted for simply existing." The queen's eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise crossing her features. "Bold words," she said softly. "And yet you risk your life to save her. Why?" Kale hesitated, then spoke honestly. "I do not know entirely. Perhaps it is honor, perhaps it is something else, but I will not leave her to face death alone." Malith regarded him for a long moment, then smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "You have courage, human," she said, "and perhaps mercy. Very few possess both, very few survive." Lyra watched silently, her heart pounding. She had never seen her mother look at anyone this way, other than herself, with curiosity and calculation. She felt hope and fear and confusion all at once. Malith's gaze returned to Kale. "I will not kill you immediately," she said, "but you will face a trial. A test of your heart and loyalty. Save my daughter from a curse that will awaken soon, or you will not leave this citadel alive." Kale's jaw tightened. "A curse?" Malith nodded. "Yes. One that will force Lyra to obey me completely or suffer a fate that even I would not wish upon her. You will save her or die trying." Lyra's eyes widened. "I don't understand," she whispered. "A curse? What does it mean?" Kale took her hand gently. It means we face a new challenge, but we face it together. I will not let you fall, Lyra, trust me. She nodded, trembling but determined. I trust you, Kale, always. Malith stepped back, her expression cold but thoughtful. Then prepare yourselves. The curse will awaken at midnight, and when it does, the true test begins. With that, she disappeared into the shadows, leaving Kale and Lyra alone in the chamber. The weight of her words pressed heavily on them. Kale knew that the coming trial would be dangerous, perhaps more dangerous than anything they had faced so far. Yet he also knew that he could not abandon Lyra, not now, not ever. They spent the day preparing, gathering what little supplies they could find, and studying the symbols and writings on the walls. Kale explained to Lyra what he could about the magic he recognized, though he admitted he knew very little of veil sorcery. She listened intently, her mind sharp despite her fear. As evening fell, they rested, their backs against the cold stone walls. Kale kept watch, his senses alert for any sign of danger. Lyra leaned against him slightly, her small hand brushing his arm. He did not move away. The bond between them had grown stronger, forged through fear, trust, and shared struggle. You know, Lyra said quietly, I never imagined someone like you, a human, would care for me. I thought everyone only cared about power, about control. Kale shook his head. Some people do. But some fight for what is right, and some fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Lyra's eyes softened. You are different, Kale, and I feel safer with you than I have in my entire life. Kale's heart ached at her words. And I will protect you, Lyra. No matter what comes, I promise. As midnight approached, the air in the chamber grew colder. Shadows seemed to gather, twisting unnaturally along the walls. Kale's grip on his sword tightened. The curse was awakening, and with it, a new level of danger. Suddenly, a faint glow appeared in the center of the room. Symbols of ancient magic floated in the air, forming a barrier around Lyra. She gasped, frozen in place. Kale stepped forward, placing himself between her and the glowing barrier. The air crackled with energy. Whispers filled the chamber, echoing from every corner. Kale's voice was steady as he spoke. Lyra, stay calm, do not fight it, trust me. Lyra nodded, her eyes wide with fear and trust. Kale raised his sword and began moving through the barrier, feeling the magic press against him, testing his will, his courage, and his loyalty. Hours seemed to pass as Kale fought against the curse, his strength and determination pushed to the limit. Lyra's presence fueled him, her trust and reliance giving him the courage to endure. Finally, with a surge of will, the barrier shattered, the symbols dissolving into the night air. Lyra collapsed into his arms, trembling but free. Kale held her tightly, relief and exhaustion washing over him. It's over, he whispered. You're safe. Lyra looked up at him, tears in her eyes. I knew you would save me, she said softly. Always. Kale smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Always, he repeated, but even as they embraced, a shadow moved silently in the corner of the chamber. Queen Malith's gaze watched them, her expression unreadable. She had seen their bond grow, their courage and loyalty tested. And though she did not show it, a flicker of respect and perhaps curiosity stirred within her. The trial was over, but the path ahead was only beginning. The citadel was silent, yet the air carried a tension so thick it seemed to press against the walls. Kale and Lyra walked carefully through the corridors, their footsteps echoing softly in the empty halls. Though the curse had been broken, the atmosphere remained heavy, as if the castle itself watched them, waiting for the next test. Lyra shivered despite the warmth of the sun filtering through the high windows. Kale, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, what if there's more danger ahead? What if the trial isn't over? Kale looked at her with steady eyes. Then we face it together, he said. Whatever comes, I won't let anything happen to you. Lyra wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust the human who had saved her life and stood by her when everyone else, including her own people, had treated her as fragile or expendable. But the memory of her mother's wrath and the veil's unforgiving ways made fear linger like a shadow. As they moved deeper into the citadel, they arrived at a vast hall, its ceiling stretching into darkness above. In the center, a faintly glowing portal shimmered, framed by ancient runes etched into the floor. The energy radiating from it was oppressive, almost alive, and Kale instinctively knew that stepping through it would test everything he had learned about courage, loyalty, and love. This is it, Kale said quietly, the Cathedral of Shadows where the next trial begins. Lyra stared at the portal, her hand tightening on her satchel. It feels alive, she murmured, like it can see inside me. Kale placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. It will test both of us, but the strongest way through is together. Trust me, Lyra. With a deep breath, they stepped through the portal. The world changed instantly. The air was cold and heavy, carrying the scent of stone and ancient magic. They were inside a cathedral unlike any other, its walls made of black stone that seemed to drink light, its windows tall and narrow, showing visions of storms and distant lands. The floor was etched with symbols that pulsed faintly beneath their feet, and shadows danced in the corners as if alive. Lyra's eyes widened in awe and fear. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "But terrifying." Kale nodded. "We must be careful. The cathedral reacts to fear and doubt. We stay together and we will overcome it." No sooner had they entered than the first trial began. A shadow emerged from the far wall, taking the form of a figure Kale recognized from his past, a childhood friend who had died in battle. The figure smiled, a cruel, mocking expression. "You failed them," the shadow hissed. "You let everyone die. You are weak. You are nothing." Kale's heart clenched. The memories of his failures, the lives he could not save, rose up, threatening to overwhelm him. But he focused on Lyra. Her small hand found his, grounding him. "This is not real," he whispered to himself. "I am here. I protect her. That is what matters." The shadow lunged, but Kale's resolve strengthened, and he held his ground. The figure dissolved into mist, leaving him breathing heavily but unbroken. Lyra watched in awe. "You faced it," she said softly, "even when it was so real, so cruel." Kale squeezed her hand. "Fear is part of it, but courage is stronger." Their next trial tested Lyra. The shadows twisted into forms of her mother's advisors, whispering accusations and threats. "You cannot escape," they hissed. "You are weak. You will obey or you will fall." Lyra's knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, trembling. Kale knelt beside her, lifting her chin gently. "Lyra, listen to me. You are stronger than you know. You are not what they say. You are not a prisoner of fear. Stand with me. Stand with yourself." Her breath came in quick, shallow gasps, but slowly she rose, gripping Kale's hand tightly. The shadows hissed and shrieked, but she did not falter. Together they moved forward, the cathedral testing their bond as much as their individual strength. Hours passed. The trials grew harder. Kale and Lyra faced illusions of death, voices that mocked their deepest insecurities, and visions of despair. Each time they leaned on each other, Kale reminding Lyra of her courage, Lyra reminding Kale of his strength. At one point, they reached a room filled with mirrors, each reflecting not their physical forms, but the fears in their hearts. Kale saw himself failing everyone he had ever tried to protect. Lyra saw herself as a helpless prisoner, destined to obey her mother's will. "You see only what you fear," Kale said, gripping her hand. "These reflections are lies. Look at me, look at us. We are stronger than this." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "I can't do it alone." "You are not alone," Kale replied firmly. "Not now, not ever." Together they stepped through the mirror room. The illusions shattered around them, the cathedral seeming to acknowledge their strength. The shadows retreated, and the faint glow of light returned, guiding them toward the final chamber. There, in the center of a circular room, hovered a magical seal. It pulsed with energy, dark and intense. Kale knew immediately this was the heart of the trial. If they failed here, Lyra's freedom and perhaps her life would be lost. The seal reacted to their presence, shifting and twisting, forming shapes and images that challenged their emotions. Kale saw visions of Lyra being taken, her life in danger, and his heart clenched. Lyra saw herself alone, helpless, and despair threatened to overwhelm her. Kale stepped forward. "We face this together. Our bond is stronger than fear, stronger than magic. We endure this together." He reached for the seal, feeling the magical energy pressing against him, testing his will. Lyra placed her hands on his, her presence strengthening him. The magic tested them, pulling at their fears, forcing them to confront every doubt and insecurity they had ever carried. Hours passed like minutes. Kale's strength waned, but Lyra's trust, her courage, kept him going. Lyra's fear tried to hold her back, but Kale's presence reminded her that she was not powerless. Their combined determination created a force stronger than the magic of the cathedral. Finally, with a surge of will, the seal shattered. The energy dissolved into the air, leaving the room still and quiet. Kale and Lyra collapsed, exhausted but triumphant. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes shining. "WWE did it," she whispered. "I can't believe it." Kale smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You did it, Lyra. You were brave, stronger than anyone could imagine." She leaned against him, her small hand resting on his arm. "And you never gave up on me," she said softly. Kale's chest tightened. "I promised I wouldn't," he said, "and I never will." For a moment they simply sat together, the weight of the trials behind them. The cathedral had tested their hearts, their courage, and their trust in each other. They had faced illusions and fears that seemed insurmountable. Yet through it all they had emerged stronger, not just as individuals but together. But as they prepared to leave the cathedral, Kale sensed a presence. A shadow moved in the corner of the room, barely visible. Queen Malith's gaze rested upon them, her expression unreadable. She had witnessed their bond, their courage, and the way they had relied on each other. Though she did not intervene, her eyes carried both curiosity and approval. Lyra noticed Kale's tense expression. "What is it?" she asked quietly. "Someone is watching," Kale said softly. "But not in anger. They are observing us, waiting to see what we will do next." Lyra nodded. Though exhausted, she felt a sense of accomplishment. They had faced the impossible and survived, and through it all their trust and bond had only grown stronger. As they stepped back into the corridors of the Citadel, Lyra's hand found Kale's again. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but full of meaning. "For believing in me?" Kale smiled faintly. "I always will," he said, "no matter what comes next." Outside, the night air was cool and clear. The stars shone above, and for the first time in her life, Lyra felt a sense of hope. The path ahead was still dangerous, and Queen Malith's judgment still loomed. But Kale's presence reminded her that she was not alone, that she could face whatever came next. Kale led her to a hidden chamber within the citadel where they could rest for the night. The trials had left them both weary, but their bond had deepened, stronger than any fear, stronger than any magic. And as they settled in, a distant echo carried through the halls, a whisper of coming danger, a reminder that the journey was far from over. Kale tightened his grip on Lyra's hand. "Whatever happens," he said, "we face it together." Lyra nodded, her eyes shining with determination and trust. "Together," she echoed. Somewhere in the shadows, Queen Malith watched them both. The mother's fury had not faded, but neither had her curiosity. She had seen something rare in Kale, a human who fought not for power, but for loyalty and love. And though she would never admit it aloud, a flicker of respect stirred within her. The cathedral trials had ended, but the true challenges, the battles of heart, loyalty, and trust, were only beginning. The first light of dawn broke over the horizon, spilling golden rays across the human lands and the distant shadowed towers of the Vale Citadel. The air was tense with anticipation. Kale and Lyra stood at the edge of a hill, overlooking the battlefield below. The human army had gathered, disciplined and wary, while the Vale forces, dark and ethereal, formed a silent line beyond the forest. Between them stretched a valley, scarred from previous battles, a reminder of the long-standing enmity between the two races. Lyra's fingers tightened on Kale's arm. "Do we really have to face them?" she whispered, fear and doubt flickering in her eyes. Kale knelt beside her, meeting her gaze. "We don't have a choice," he said softly. "But we aren't facing this alone. Not you, not me, not the people who will fight for what is right. And remember, we've survived far worse. Together we can face this." Her gaze softened. "Together," she repeated, the word carrying weight, comfort, and hope. The two of them descended the hill, moving carefully through hidden paths to avoid detection. Kale's mind was alert to every sound, the whisper of leaves, the distant clatter of armor, the faint magical hum that hinted at the presence of Vale sorcery. Lyra stayed close, her small hand occasionally brushing his, grounding him, reminding him of why he was here. As they approached the front lines, Kale could see the tension among both armies. Humans gripped their weapons tightly, but their faces were not just filled with determination, they were laced with uncertainty. The Vale, with their pale skin and unnatural grace, were calm yet unyielding, their eyes fixed on the valley, their loyalty unwavering. Then, above the din of preparation, a horn sounded, low and foreboding. The Vale forces began to advance, their movement almost silent yet ominous. Kale's hand found Lyra's. "Stay close," he whispered. The first clash was sudden. Human and Vale soldiers collided with the sound of clashing steel and battle cries. Kale moved swiftly, his sword cutting a path while keeping Lyra protected. She was no longer just the frightened girl from the forest. The trials had forged her courage. She moved with agility and focus, dodging, observing, and assisting where she could, her eyes sharp with determination. In the midst of chaos, Kale spotted a group of Vale soldiers moving toward Lyra, their intentions clear. Without hesitation, he leapt in front of her, parrying their attacks with skill honed from years of battle. Lyra watched, awe and fear mingling in her gaze. "Kale," she whispered, but he gave her a small, reassuring nod. The battle raged on. Magic and steel clashed in ways both terrifying and beautiful. The veil unleashed spells of shadow and fire, while human soldiers used arrows, swords, and cunning strategies. Kale fought tirelessly, driven not by hatred or vengeance, but by his promise to protect Lyra. Suddenly, a flash of dark energy struck near them, sending Kale stumbling back. Lyra reacted instinctively, using a small charm Kale had taught her to deflect the magic. Together, they faced the soldiers who pressed toward them, their bond evident in the way they moved as one. From a high vantage point, Queen Malith observed the battlefield. Her eyes followed every movement of her daughter and the human beside her. Kale's courage had forced her to reconsider everything she believed about humans, loyalty, and even love. Though her expression remained stern, a flicker of admiration crossed her features. As the battle intensified, Kale and Lyra reached the center of the valley, where the fighting was fiercest. They moved carefully, keeping each other safe, guiding lost soldiers, and defending those who faltered. The battlefield was chaos, yet amidst it, their bond became a beacon of hope. Soldiers on both sides noticed their unity, their courage, and some even hesitated in the face of such determination. Then came the moment of the final test. From the sky, a surge of dark magic swept across the battlefield, threatening to turn the tide entirely in favor of the Veil. Kale recognized the spell. It was one that could overwhelm even the strongest warriors if left unchecked. He turned to Lyra. "We have to stop it together," he shouted over the roar of battle. Lyra nodded, stepping beside him. The trials had prepared her for this. She focused her energy, channeling the courage she had gained and the trust she placed in Kale. He did the same, feeling the surge of her resolve strengthen him. Together, they faced the dark spell, their bond creating a shield that countered its destructive force. The energy crashed against them, shaking the earth and sending waves of power across the valley. Kale gritted his teeth, holding firm. Lyra's hand found his, and the combined force of their will pushed the darkness back. Slowly, painfully, the spell broke apart, dissolving into harmless sparks that vanished into the sky. The battlefield fell silent for a moment. Soldiers on both sides stared, breathless, as Kale and Lyra stood together, their bond having changed the course of the fight. Then slowly, human soldiers cheered, rallying once more, while some Veil soldiers, seeing the courage and determination displayed, lowered their weapons. Kale glanced at Lyra, seeing the exhaustion and relief on her face. "We did it," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Lyra smiled faintly, leaning against him. "Together," she whispered. In the aftermath, the valley was scarred but no longer a place of hopelessness. The battle was over, and the cost, though heavy, had been survived. Queen Malith approached, her presence commanding yet calm. She studied Kale, then Lyra, and finally spoke. "You have proven your loyalty, human," she said, her voice carrying weight, "and your courage rare even among your own kind." She turned to Lyra. "And you, my daughter, have shown strength beyond what I expected. You have chosen your path, and I will not interfere. Your bond with him has saved more than just your life." Lyra's eyes filled with tears of relief and gratitude. She looked at Kale, seeing not just the man who had saved her, but someone who had changed the course of history with her. Kale bowed his head slightly, exhausted but proud. "Thank you," he said humbly, "for seeing the truth and for letting us protect each other." Malith's gaze softened, though she remained regal and formidable. "You have my respect," she said, "and my gratitude. I will honor the promise I made to protect your legacy and your life." As the sun set over the valley, Kale and Lyra walked together through the aftermath of the battlefield. Soldiers on both sides tended to the wounded, repaired what they could, and quietly reflected on the courage they had witnessed. Kale and Lyra's bond had inspired hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, unity and courage could prevail. Lyra leaned against Kale as they walked. "I can't believe we survived," she said softly. Kale smiled faintly. "We survived because we trusted each other. Because we believed in more than fear or hatred." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes shining. "And I will never forget this. You changed my life, Kale, and maybe you've changed mine forever." Kale's heart tightened at her words. "And you've changed mine," he admitted quietly. "I never thought that helping someone like you would mean so much, but it does, more than I can say." They walked in silence for a while, the valley stretching before them, peaceful for the first time in decades. The human and Vale forces began to withdraw, acknowledging the fragile peace that had been achieved. Though tension still lingered between the races, hope had taken root, and the courage of two individuals had inspired others to consider that even old enemies could find common ground. As night fell, they reached a quiet hill overlooking the valley. The stars shone brightly, mirrored in Lyra's eyes. She turned to Kale. "Do you think we can really have peace now?" Kale took her hand gently. "I think we have a chance," he said. "A chance to make things better, and we'll face it together no matter what comes." Lyra nodded, a soft smile spreading across her face. "Together," she echoed. Kale looked up at the sky, feeling the weight of everything they had endured, the forest, the cathedral, the battlefield. Each challenge had tested them, shaped them, and strengthened the bond they shared. He turned to Lyra, seeing not just a girl he protected, but a partner, an equal, and someone whose courage inspired him every day. "Whatever comes next," Kale said softly, "we face it side by side, always." Lyra leaned against him, feeling the warmth and safety of his presence. "Always," she agreed, her voice filled with certainty and hope. From a distance, in the shadows, Queen Maleth watched them. Her expression remained regal, unreadable, yet inside, a rare feeling stirred, gratitude and respect. She had witnessed something extraordinary, loyalty, courage, and love that transcended fear, prejudice, and duty. And though she would never admit it aloud, she knew their bond would leave a lasting mark on both human and Vale history. The valley lay quiet under the starlight. The battles had ended, the trials had been overcome, and a fragile peace had been won. Kale and Lyra sat together, side by side, knowing that the road ahead would still hold challenges, but confident in their bond, their courage, and the promise they had made to each other. For the first time in years, Lyra felt truly free. And Kale, who had once wandered the borderlands burdened by the horrors of war, felt hope again. Together, they had survived impossible trials, faced ancient magic, and discovered a bond stronger than any curse or enemy. And as the night wrapped the valley in its quiet embrace, Kale and Lyra knew this truth. No matter what the world demanded of them, they would face it together, bound by courage, trust, and a love that had grown from the darkness into a light that would never fade. The stars above seemed to shine just a little brighter that night, as if blessing the beginning of a new era, not just for Kale and Lyra, but for all who would come after, inspired by the courage of two souls who refused to give up on each other.